Manna and the Light of the Timekeepers, a calm story about movement, time, unease, and finding your own rhythm. Once I knew a boy who could not sit still long enough to hear his own strength. His name was Manna. Manna had often been told that he should try to sit a little more still, not always in an angry way. Sometimes it was said with tired adult voices that were only trying to help. Other times it came with a sigh that made him feel as if his knees, his fingers, his thoughts, and all his questions were little things falling from a shelf, making noise everywhere. At school, Manna could hear the teacher. In fact, he heard a lot. He heard the pencil rolling at the far end of the table. He heard the lamp humming softly above him. He heard the chair squeak whenever someone shifted their weight. He heard the words about page 47. But at the very same time, he could see how the numbers on the page might become stairs, how the lines in the book might become bridges, and how the clock on the wall looked like a round sea with two long arms sailing around and around, never finding an island. When Manna was asked to focus on one thing, it felt like being told to hold a whole handful of stars between two fingers. The stars always slipped away, not because he wanted them to, not because he did not try, but because inside him there were so many beginnings at once that one beginning sometimes felt too small to be the true one. On the day this story began, Manna sat in class with one foot wrapped around the leg of his chair. His other foot tapped a rhythm only he knew. His hand drew tiny islands on the edge of his paper. He was not drawing because he was not listening. He was drawing because his hand listened too. "Manna," the teacher said gently, "can you try to be with us a little more?" The strange thing was that Manna did not feel far away. He felt too much here in the chair, here in the sounds, here in the clock, here in the pencil, here in the thought of islands, here in the feeling that everyone else had found a secret button called calm, while he had found a whole box of bells. That evening, Manna lay in bed, but his body would not lie down inside itself. His toes drummed under the blanket. His fingers folded the edge of his pillow. His thoughts jumped from school to drawing, from drawing to the clock, from the clock to the sea, and from the sea to something he did not know yet. At last he whispered into the dark, "I do not think I have a place. I think I only disturb everyone else." That was when he heard a small click, not from the door, not from the window, from the clock on the wall. The hands were no longer pointing at the time. The long hand pointed toward the floor. The short hand pointed toward his chest, as if the clock had noticed something in him that Manna himself had missed. Then a strip of light opened beneath his bed. It was not sharp, it was not frightening. It was more like someone lighting a small lamp in a room that everyone had thought was empty. The strip of light widened, and beneath it there was no floor. There was a path made of stardust, moss, and tiny cogwheels turning so slowly that they almost looked like flowers. On the first stone of the path, golden letters appeared. "Here, you may move in order to land." Manna lowered one foot over the edge of the bed. The path did not feel like a floor. It felt like soft moss beneath his toes. It was cool and warm at the same time, as if it remembered both night and hands. When he took the next step, his room did not disappear behind him. It simply folded together, quietly, like a blanket. And in front of him, a forest grew. The trees stood close together, but they were not threatening. Lanterns glowed in their branches like little lights inside cracks in the bark. Their roots lay across the ground like old, friendly fingers. There was a den in the side of a hill, round and low, with a small door made of wood and moss. Above the door it said, "The Safe Den." The letters were not all alike. Some looked as if they had been carved a little crooked, the way children draw. Some looked as if the wind had written them. Manna stopped. All day people had wanted him to be still, but here no one asked him to be anything. The den just waited. Not impatiently, not with a sigh. It waited in a way that gave him space. Inside the safe den, Manna could see pillows, blankets, an old lamp, and shelves filled with things that did not quite look like toys, but still felt as if they wanted to be played with. There was a stone with a white line on it, a feather, a small key with no lock, a cup glazed in blue, a compass without north, a glove threaded with silver, and a bowl where the water lay so still that it almost looked like an eye. Manna stepped inside and began to walk around the table. First slowly, then faster again, because his body was finally allowed to do something. On his third lap, he noticed something strange. The things on the shelves did not blur when he moved. They became clearer. The more he walked, the more he saw that every object had a small light around it, a little like a story waiting to be told. "You do not have to sit still to listen," said a voice from the beam above the door. Manna spun around and almost made one more lap around the table. On the beam sat a large owl with eyes like deep wells of amber and moonlight. Her feathers were brown, grey, and gold, and around her neck she wore something that looked like a scarf made from the first bright second before dawn. "But you do have to learn to listen while you move," said the owl. "Who are you?" Manna asked. "Some call me Unease," she said. "Some call me Unease the Owl. I am not the kind of unease that destroys. I am the kind of unease that knocks when something inside you wants to be understood." Manna sank down into his knees. He did not run around the table quite so fast now. Not because he had been told to stop, but because his legs seemed to know they were allowed to rest for a moment. "I thought unease was something you had to get rid of," he said. Unease the owl blinked slowly. "Only when unease stands alone in the dark. When unease receives light, it can become direction." She flew down from the beam without a sound. When her wings opened, the room did not become smaller. It became larger. Behind her, the wall of the safe den opened like mist, and Manna saw a forest path beyond it. At first it was broad and safe. Then it divided into 3 smaller paths beneath the leaves. "The first one you must know is Milo," said Unease the owl. Milo had walked out from the safe den because the forest had called. Not loudly, just a little. That is how a story calls when it knows a child is ready for more than the child believes. In the mist, Manna saw a boy with a small bag, an apple, some bread, a pocket stone, and a little scarf that looked like the scent of home. Milo followed a butterfly. First slowly, then faster. Then the path narrowed, the forest grew close, and suddenly the way back no longer looked the way it had before. Manna felt it deep in his stomach. Not only as fear, but as the feeling he got when a school task suddenly had too many steps. First, you think you know where you are. Then the words become branches. Then there are 3 possible ways, and all of them might be wrong. Milo thought the unfamiliar meant danger, said Unease the owl. But in the world of the safe den, the unfamiliar is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is a helper that does not look like help yet. A round little being rolled out from between the roots in the mist. He looked like a pile of leaves that had grown eyes like rain-wet nuts, thin arms, and a silly hat shaped like a chestnut. He bowed so deeply that he almost tipped over. "Rumble," said Unease the owl. "He can hear small, safe sounds that most people miss." "Small sounds?" Manna asked. "Yes, a branch that does not break, water that does not hurry, a stomach that lets go of tension for half a second." Rumble taught Milo that slow does not mean weak. The image changed. Milo stood beside a stream where the water did not only reflect his face, it reflected something behind his face too. A den, a lamp, and the feeling of belonging. At the bank stood a tall, thin figure with hair like silver threads and eyes that had seen many children get lost without ever calling them wrong. "The mirror keeper," said Unease the owl. "She shows that home is not only a place behind the trees, it can also be something you carry inside your body." Then Manna saw a great tree being, with bark shoulders, mossy branches, and eyes like dark amber. Milo leaned against one of his large roots, and the whole image stopped trembling. "Holdfast," said Unease the owl. "He holds without taking over. That matters. A good helper does not carry the child the whole way. A good helper makes the next step possible." Manna looked down at his own feet. They already wanted to move on, but something in him had understood the first lesson. Maybe he did not have to find the whole way at once. Maybe one movement could be enough, if it had light. When Unease the owl folded her wings, the forest did not vanish. It became a smell of wet bark in Manna's clothes. In front of the safe den, a new path opened down toward water. Not ordinary water. It was a dark blue sea where moonlight and morning light lay together, as if time had not decided to be only one thing. At a little dock stood an old man with a soft felt hat, a beard like foam on waves, and eyes that looked as if they had followed dream boats for hundreds of years. "I do not lend the fastest boat to everyone," he said before Mana could ask. "Some children need speed, some need direction, and some need a boat that can hear when they are about to rush past the most important part." Beside the dock lay a white boat with pale blue edges and a small bell. It did not ring like ding, it rang more like a thought being noticed just in time. "This boat is called Presence," said the boat lender. "Alba borrowed it." Mana looked confused because there were many new names and many new things to remember. The old man pointed out across the water, the sea filled with islands. Some were so small they had only one tree and a bench. Others were so large they held castles, Ferris wheels, towers, bridges, tents, library corners, campfires and slides that curled like laughter. Alba wanted to reach all of it, the boat lender continued. Summerland Island, Princess Island, Camping Island, Playland Island, and Teddy Bear Island. She could sail fast, very fast. But speed can trick a child into thinking they have experienced something only because they have passed it. Mana felt a sharp little spark of recognition. He could pass things quickly too. Not because he did not care, but because something new was always shining beside the thing he was already in. The boat lender pointed with his pipe toward an island where sun-warmed terraces glittered, and someone waited at the dock with towels over their arms. Summerland Island smells of splashing water and joy in the stomach. But Alba learned that you do not truly visit an island simply by stepping onto it. You visit it by noticing who is waiting there. Another island lit up in pink and gold. Tiny castles with secret staircases rose among tea tables where friendly baby dragons rolled on their backs with laughter. Farther away lay Camping Island, with fires, cocoa, and rain on tent cloth. Playland Island almost bounced by itself, and Teddy Bear Island was round and soft like a hug that did not ask for an explanation. "So it is about stopping?" Mana asked uncertainly. "Not only," said the boat lender. "Presence is not the opposite of movement. Presence means being where the movement is." The boat's bell rang once. Mana noticed that he had been standing completely still without forcing himself to do it. Not because everything inside him had become silent, but because everything inside him had listened in the same direction for one moment. Just as Mana thought he might step into the boat, a blue-white bird swept down from the sky. She had very long wings, as if someone had made her from mist, feathers, and the lightest laughter. She landed on the edge of the boat, tilted her head, and looked at Mana's hands, which never quite knew where to be. "Hands can listen too," she said. "They can?" asked Mana. "Elian learned it," said the bird. "My name is Swallow, and I know something about air that is not merely empty." The sea did not rise, and yet, suddenly, Mana stood in a meadow covered in silver-blue moonlight. The grass moved slowly, and in the distance the islands lay like stars that had fallen down and become places. In the middle of the meadow stood a boy with curls, bare feet, and arms lifting slowly out to his sides. "Elian could almost fly before he could explain it," said Swallow. "But almost is a very important word. Almost is the place where courage begins to grow muscles." Mana watched Elian press his arms downward, not hard, but as if he could feel something soft beneath them. His heels left the ground for a moment, and then he came down again. Not like a failure, more like a beginning, smiling shyly. "I would have tried again right away," said Mana. "So did Elian," said Swallow, "and that is why he had to learn the pause." Swallow flew in a curve around Mana's head. "Dream flying is not fighting your way upward. It is push, hold, fall, glide, and lift. You do not always rise higher by wanting higher. Sometimes you must drift down a little to find the next wind." Above the water stood an almost transparent figure with hair like mist and clothes like moving clouds. Long hands changed the wind the way others might change the tone of a song. "The wind weaver," whispered Swallow. "He does not only teach children to find air beneath them, he teaches them to feel the air in front, behind, below, beside, the whole field." Mana closed his eyes. He could feel the air against his cheeks, against his wrists, and between his fingers. He could feel that his own unease also had direction. Forward, upward, outward, backward, around. Maybe it could not be stopped simply by saying stop. Maybe it could be guided by learning its wind. Try, said Swallow. Manna lifted his arms, first too quickly, then again more slowly. He bent his knees. He did not push upward. He pressed down against an invisible cushion, and for one quiet second, his feet slowly left the ground. He did not go very far, just far enough to see that the safe den, the forest, the sea, and the islands were connected below him. When he landed, he was not disappointed. He felt warm in his chest. Almost could be a kind of yes. The next morning light in Dreamland was still night. That is how it was there. Time could be more than one thing without arguing with itself. Manna followed the moon path along the water where stones glowed beneath his feet. By the bank sat a girl with a small box in her lap. She had placed things in rows: a stone with a white line, an almost grey feather, a small key, a piece of sea-smoothed glass, a button, a dried flower, and a bit of string with 3 knots. Her hands touched the things with such careful accuracy that Manna slowed down without being told to. "You must be Lever," he said, because her name seemed to stand in the air around her like gentle writing. Lever nodded. "For a long time I understood things better than people," she said. "Things do not change the rules in the middle of a game." Manna did not quite sit down. He crouched, then stood up, then crouched again. Lever did not look confused. She simply moved her box a little so he had room to bounce on his toes. "People sometimes say that things are just things," Lever continued, "but here I learned that quiet things can be bridges. You can hold a stone when you cannot hold a conversation. You can turn a button between your fingers while you find out what you mean. You can have a key before you know which door exists." The water in front of them began to move. A door appeared in the middle of the surface, blue and shining, as if it had been painted with night. Lever's little key did not fit any ordinary door in the everyday world, but here it fit perfectly. Behind the door was a floating library. Shelves hung in the air. Books flew like quiet birds, and old legends shimmered on their spines. In the center stood a figure in a night blue cloak with stars along the edges, a lantern in her hand, and a gaze that did not force answers out of anyone. "The Dream Master," said Lever, "or the Dream Apprentice, depending on where in the story you meet her. She teaches children that you do not have to control the whole dream. You only have to choose the next honest step." A shadow slipped between the shelves. It had 1,000 faces, changing so quickly that Manna wanted to run. The faces whispered, "You are too much. You break the calm. The others understand it better. You should be able to sit still." Manna froze. "It knows me," he whispered. Lever lifted a dream light. "It knows many children," she said, "but it is not true just because it can use your words." The light fell on the shadow. The 1,000 faces became mist, and the mist became a little girl with her knees pulled up. "Not dangerous, just afraid." "The mist girl," said Lever, "the great unreadable. Sometimes the thing that frightens us grows large because it has not yet been seen gently." Something inside Manna stopped running in circles. Not completely, just a little. Lever did not give him the key because it was hers, but she let him look at it closely. On the metal, words were written, "Your own way in." The library shelves became masts, and the books became sails. The door on the water became an old wooden bridge where small blue fish glowed around the posts like living lanterns. At the far end, a ship rocked gently. It had deep green sails stitched with stars and a figurehead shaped like a sea creature with kind eyes. On the gangplank stood a man with a beard like salt and moonlight, a blue coat with copper buttons, and a hat with a feather that looked like sunset. "Captain Moonnot," he said before Manna had time to ask, "keeper of maps, holder of night compasses, and lender of ships that do not sail for the child, but with the child's courage." "Is that the Starbiter?" Manna asked, feeling the name in his mouth like brass bells. The captain smiled. This was Oliver's ship. The island realm spread out before them. It was not like Alba's gentle islands. This was darker, larger, more dramatic. There was Machine Island, with cogwheels, cranes, steam crabs, and mechanical beetles. Dino Island, where towering ferns swayed above enormous footprints in the mud. Cake Island, with cakes so huge that anyone would surely get a stomachache. Pirate Cove, with red sails and cannon cliffs. Giant Crab Coast, where moonlight shone over shield-shaped rocks. Treasure Grotto, a glittering mark on the map. And Storm Strait, where the water became thick and almost black, and the wind spun around itself. Oliver was afraid of dark rooms, loud voices, and the moment when everyone looks at you, said Captain Moon-Knot. Fear can feel like a sea you cannot sail, so Dreamland gave him a wheel. Manor placed his hands on the wheel of the Starbiter. The wood was warm. It did not shake less because he was shaking. It shook with him. He could feel that there was a large story behind this wheel. From the fog came a great ship with sails like night bats. Figures in mist clothes stood along the rail, and a tall, thin captain in a smoke-spiraled cloak lifted a dull sword. "Fear tax," whispered the voice. "Give us your light. Give us your courage. Give us your will. Then you will not have to be afraid." Manor's fingers went cold. He could almost hear his own everyday life inside the pirates' voices. "Give us your movement. Give us your questions. Give us your many thoughts. Then you will fit in better." Oliver learned something important here, Captain Moon-Knot said quietly. Shadow pirates can only shoot with material the child already knows. They make old leftovers from the day seem bigger. But when you see them clearly, they shrink. Manor held the wheel, not prettily, not calmly, but firmly. "I will not pay with what is me," he said. The ship of the shadow pirates did not disappear at once, but it became a little smaller. First it was a boat, then a shadow under the water, then a thought that was still there, but no longer steering the sea. From Dino Island came a roar, and a long-necked giant slapped its tail into the water so hard that waves pushed the shadow toward the open sea. Manor laughed because fear and dinosaurs suddenly existed in the same breath. That made the fear feel less lonely. When the fog of the island realm lifted, Manor stood beside a path of silver light. Above the path hung a sign, and the letters looked as if they had been written by someone who knew loneliness well. The Swarm Path. Beneath it were the words, "Everyone who thinks they are walking alone walks here." Beside the sign sat a girl with dark hair and a backpack full of small things. She looked out over Dreamland as if she both longed for it and feared that it might look back too much. "Nadja," said Manor, as if he suddenly remembered her. She nodded. "I often thought everyone else understood the invisible rules," she said, "and that only I got tired from guessing faces, voices, and laughter." Something soft nudged Manor's hand. It was a being the size of a small child, round like a baby hedgehog, a moss animal, and a sleeping cloud all at once. His fur was made of leaves, feathers, and down, and around his head was a little crown of branches with tiny bells. His eyes were amber gold. "Murmur," said Nadja. "Murmur gathers thoughts when they lie on top of each other." Murmur handed Manor a heart lantern. Its light was not strong enough to blind anyone. It was strong enough to ask, "Do I know this, or do I fear this?" "I know I disturb people," Manor said quickly. The heart lantern did not blink, yes. It glowed gently, as if asking him to look again. Nadja placed a mirror stone in his hand. In the stone he did not see himself alone. He saw children, adults, teachers, parents, siblings, and creatures, all carrying something invisible. Worry, unease, sorrow, expectation, shame, joy, fear. Some carried it in their shoulders, some behind their eyes, some in their hands. "The feeling of being the only one is often a lie," said Nadja. "Not an evil lie, a frightened lie." The path led them into the workshop of Twine the Thoughtsmith. It was built from clouds, suitcases, silk ribbons, driftwood, and moon slices. A tall, thin figure with silver hair like yarn and fast fingers stood at a bench full of thought knots. "Twine," she said without looking up, "Thoughtsmith, pocket maker, storm namer, hands forward." Manor did not fully understand, but he held out his hands. Twine gave him a pair of thought gloves threaded with silver. "Not to hold your thoughts down," she said, "to lift them away from your face, so you can see that they are thoughts." Then she blew a small mist into a glass tube. "Pause, wind," she said, "not a punishment pause, a breathing pause. That is something else." In the rumor passage, dark flowers whispered, "You are too much. You learn wrong. You fall behind because you walk around inside." Manor lifted the thought with the gloves. It looked like a black thread with knots all through it. "This is a thought," he said, "not proof." When he said it, the thread turned grey, not silver, not bright, but no longer black. Then it lay down like a path marker along the swarm path instead of wrapping itself around his throat. Behind Twine's house, a plank path appeared. It was not made from straight boards, it was made from planks, screws, moss, ropes, and tiny drawn lines, as if someone had built a road out of ideas that could not lie still. Manna liked it immediately. At the end of the plank path lay a floating platform above Dreamland. Cranes lifted beams between islands, cogwheels turned under bridges, small beings carried drawings, nails, lanterns, nuts, paint, and stardust. Some had parchment wings like beavers. Some were round night creatures with pockets. Some had bark skin and cogwheels on their belts. In the middle of everything stood a boy with curly hair, an apron, and a sketchbook open before him. He looked at a half-finished bridge as if it already had a history, a city, a reason, a secret passage, and 3 possible endings. "Arthur," said Manna at once, without quite understanding how he knew all these names, because if anyone could understand that a thing was never only a thing, it had to be Arthur. Arthur looked over and smiled. "I had too many worlds inside me for people to always follow," said Arthur. "Some thought I did not listen, but sometimes I listened so much that I also heard what had not yet been built." A broad being came walking between the beams. He seemed made of wood, canvas, stone, and clouds, with bark patterns across his skin and hands so warm and strong they looked like workshops. Tools hung from his belt, but also little cups, stones, and rolled-up plans. "Bridgehold," said Arthur. "He taught me that imagination is not a mistake." "But imagination needs a building place," Bridgehold said. "Otherwise, it builds on top of everything else." He crouched in front of Manna. It creaked like a boat, but safely. "Where are your feet right now?" asked Bridgehold. "On a platform," said Manna. "And where are your thoughts?" Manna looked around at the platform and the clock far away. At school, at the island realm, at Naja's path, at whether he might also be something important, or whether he only believed that, because this might be a dream. Bridgehold laughed softly. "It is good that you can see many layers," he said. "That is not nothing, but you must learn to lay the layers so they can carry weight." He gave Manna an anchor stone. Without words, it asked, "Where are my feet right now?" Then Bridgehold gave him the listening cups, which could turn down everything else a little and turn up what had been chosen. Finally, he showed Manna Arthur's world sketchbook, where inner universes could land on pages before they filled the whole head. On the in-between island, Manna saw children building in many different ways. Some measured everything, some sang while they carried boards, some drew first, some built first, some tried first and corrected later. There were sound arches, towers, workshops, gardens, harbours, bridges, and a huge house called the Master Builder's House, filled with maps of islands not yet finished. "You can be wise in many different ways," said Arthur. "The hardest part is not always having many worlds. The hardest part is giving them doors so others can enter them." Manna held the anchor stone. It did not make him smaller. It made his many thoughts a little more buildable. From the in-between island, a bridge led not to land but to water. It stopped suddenly at a low platform with no railing. The water before it was dark blue and smooth as glass, but beneath the surface, golden rings moved, as if someone had already taken steps there. On the platform stood a girl with loose hair and one foot lifted. Beside her stood a long, slender figure in a cloak woven from silver mist, reeds, and moonlight. Her hair looked like pale grey water, and her eyes were clear as a morning lake. "Olivia and Ilara," said Bridgehold behind Manna. "Here is where the water steps begin." Manna held his breath. He liked when things happened, but this happened slowly in a way that still felt exciting. Olivia placed her foot on the water. At first, it did not sink at all. A golden ring spread out around it. Then another. For one moment, she stood on something that did not yet look solid. "How?" Manna whispered. Ilara turned toward him. "First the safety bowl," she said. "Then the direction band. Then the water shoes. Then the water heart. You do not begin with the miracle. You begin by feeling your own pace." Olivia gave a short laugh because her knees were shaking. "And then," she said, "you fall in." She fell in. Water splashed over everyone nearby, but no one looked surprised. It looked as if they had all been waiting for that too. The water did not strike hard, it received her with a splash of moon silver. When she came up, she was wet, but laughing. She looked almost amazed that making a mistake had not ruined anything. "The water steps are not pretending water is a flaw," said Elara. "They are learning to place your weight on what is becoming." Mana sat on the edge and let his feet dangle from the bridge so he could feel the cool voice of the water beneath his shoes. All his life, he had often felt as if others stood on solid floors while he stood on something that kept moving. Now Dreamland was saying that the uncertain thing did not have to be wrong. It could be a technique. Far away, Elian flew over the islands. Unease the Owl sat on a branch, watching. Bridgehold held the platform with his weight, and the Dream Master stood at the edge like a dark blue light. This was not one more story. It was many stories holding the same room. "Mana," said Elara, "you are not meant to learn the water steps the way Olivia does. You must learn something that belongs to you." "What is that?" he asked. "Time steps," said Elara. "One moment, one movement, one connection, and then the next." As Olivia climbed back onto the platform, still wet and proud, the water began to shine in circles. Each circle became a path, and each path led to a being, a child, or a place around the platform. It was not like a parade. It was more like when all the stars in a constellation suddenly remember that they belong together. Milo came first, with his lantern and pocket stone. Alba came in the boat called Presence, whose little bell rang whenever someone was truly seen. Elian drifted down in a soft curve, while Swallow made a silly loop over his shoulder. Lever came with her box, her key, and a dream light that did not chase the shadows away, but made them honest. Oliver stood at the wheel of the Starbiter, with Captain Moonknot holding the compass under his arm. Naja came with Murmur, Twine, the Heart Lantern, and the Mirror Stone. Arthur came with Bridgehold, the Master Builder, the World Sketchbook, and a bridge that still only half existed. Olivia stood beside them, still a little wet, with the water heart glowing at her chest. Around them gathered more beings. The mushrooms in the clearing hummed softly, as if they were saying, "This makes sense." Baby dragons rolled giggling between the legs of the grown ones. Moon crabs blinked at the edge of the platform. Tiny swarm creatures carried lamps on their backs. The creatures from the building place held ropes and lanterns. The fish under the sea shone from below. And at the far edge of the darkness stood the Mist Girl, no longer as a monster, but as someone who was also allowed to be there. Mana stood in the middle of all this, and it almost made him feel sick how much there was. Not because he did not like it, because he liked all of it. He wanted to see the islands, ask about dinosaurs, fly with Elian, explore Arthur's cranes, try Naja's gloves, sail with Oliver, hear Lever's key, pat Murmur, count the lanterns, understand the compass, feel the water, read all the books, know why the moon looked different over each island. "There," said Unease the Owl gently. Mana froze. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," she said, "there is your gift and your hardest test, in the same place." The Dream Master raised her hand, and between all the children and beings, threads of light became visible. One thread ran from Milo's lantern to Naja's heart lantern, another from Alba's bell to Oliver's compass, a third from Elian's feather to Olivia's water shoes, a fourth from Lever's key to Arthur's world sketchbook. The threads crossed, but they did not tangle. They looked like a map of time. "You thought you had no role because you could not stay in one thing," said the Dream Master. "But dreams contain many things, and sometimes many things need someone who is not afraid of many." Mana could hardly answer. All his life, many had sounded like an accusation. Too many thoughts, too many movements, too many questions, too many ideas, too many beginnings. Now Dreamland was saying that many could be something held with light. Then came the thing that only happens when a dream has waited a very long time for the right child. The moon over Dreamland ticked. Not like a clock, like a heart that forgot its rhythm for one brief moment. First, the Ferris wheel on Summerland Island spun far too fast, until its lights became streaks. On Camping Island, the smoke above the fire froze in the air. In the island realm, the shadows of the Shadow Pirates sailed backward out of Storm Strait. On the in-between island, a bridge began building itself in every direction at once. At the swarm path, every sign began speaking at the same time. And on Olivia's water platform, the rings on the water became so many that no one could see the next step. "The time cloak," said Captain Moonnot, grabbing his hat. "It happens when too many dreams call for their own rhythm at the same time." Mana looked at the adults, the children, and the creatures. Everyone could do something. Unease could see fear. Rumble could listen to small sounds. The Mirror Keeper could show what was behind faces. Holdfast could hold. Swallow could feel the wind. Bridgehold could build. The Dream Master could change the direction of a nightmare. Ilara could read water. But this was not only fear, water, air, forest, building, or thought. This was time. Not clock time alone. Experience time, dream time, the time a feeling needs in order to be understood. The time a child needs in order to learn. The time an adventure needs to become courage and not only noise. "I cannot," Mana said at once. "I cannot even sit still for 10 minutes. "Then do not," said Unease the Owl. Mana stared at her. "You are not meant to still time by becoming stiff," she said. "You are meant to find its movement." Mana took a step, not to run away, but to feel. Under his foot, Milo's lantern blinked. He took another step, and Alba's bell rang. He bent his knees, and Elian's air carried him for half a heartbeat. He reached out his hand, and Lever's key flashed like a possibility. He turned his body as if he stood at Oliver's wheel. He lifted a thought away from his face with Naja's gloves. He pressed the anchor stone against the platform, as Arthur had learned. He placed weight on the next uncertain second, the way Olivia placed her foot on water. Each movement lit a small light, not one huge light that took over everything. Many small lights, like little lanterns sent out into the dark. They flew from Mana's chest and settled by each island, each place, each story. The Ferris wheel on Summerland Island found a joyful speed. The smoke on Camping Island rose again. The bridge on the in-between island chose one direction at a time. The swarm path let its signs speak one after another. The rings in front of Olivia opened into a clear center. Mana cried before he knew why, not loudly, just with his whole face, because it was the first time his movement had not become something that had to be stopped. It had become something that held the world together. The Dream Master stood before him. "It is not you who has been searching for this dream, Mana." All the lights in Dreamland became quiet enough to hear her. "This dream has been searching for you." On the platform between water, forest, air, and islands, time opened, not like a clock, like a book with pages made of light. On each page there was a child, Milo in the forest, Alba on the sea, Elian in the air, Lever by the door, Oliver at the wheel, Naya on the path, Arthur at the building place, Olivia at the water. Mana did not only see what they had done, he saw how much time each thing had needed. Milo had needed slow time, enough time for one step to become courage. Alba had needed presence time, enough time to notice those waiting by the dock. Elian had needed falling time, enough time to understand that down is not always back. Lever had needed own way time, enough time to use things as bridges without being pushed into the center. Oliver had needed wheel time, enough time to tremble and act at the same time. Naja had needed truth time, enough time to ask whether a thought was knowledge or fear. Arthur had needed building time, enough time to build one world onto one page so all the others did not spill everywhere. Olivia had needed beginning time, enough time to stand on water for 1 second and fall in without losing courage. And Mana, he had needed many time that did not cut him into smaller pieces just to make him easier. Time that could hold the way his understanding came through movement, play, images, questions, building, jumping, and connections. Holdfast stepped forward. From his morning branches hung a cloak woven from small seconds. Not heavy seconds, living seconds. Swallow flew a feather into the edge. Naja placed a mirror-shining thread in the lining. Arthur fastened a little anchor button at the neck. Alba tied a bell into the string. Ilara let a water light run along the hem. Lever touched the cloak with her key, and Oliver laid a compass circle at the chest. "The Timekeeper does not carry time in order to control children," said the Dream Master. "The Timekeeper carries enough light to remember that different children need different lights, different pauses, and different rhythms. Murmur shook his head. But I am still messy. Bridgehold placed a large hand on the platform in front of him, not on him. A workshop looks messy before you understand what is being built, he said. Unease, the owl nodded. And a star map looks like dots before someone sees the connections. The Dream Master lifted the cloak, but Murmur did not step into it at once. That mattered. For the first time, he did not hurry to be finished with himself. He placed a hand on his chest and felt the many light inside him. All the little lanterns that had once flashed separately now found patterns without becoming the same. I will try, said Murmur. That is how all titles begin, said Ilara. When the cloak fell around Murmur's shoulders, he did not become greater than the other children. That was almost the most beautiful thing. He did not become a king, not a leader, not someone who ruled Dreamland. He became the one who could stand in the middle for a moment and remember that the middle is not a place where everything must be still. The middle is a place where everything may have its own rhythm and its own light. When Murmur woke, the clock on the wall looked ordinary again. The long hand pointed toward morning and the short hand pointed toward a school day. The blanket lay a little crooked and his pillow was still warm. One foot was already tapping against the mattress. At first, Murmur was afraid that everything was gone. Then he felt something in his hand. Not a key, not a compass, not a stone from Dreamland. You cannot bring physical things out of Dreamland, only the ideas, the thoughts, the imagination, and the story of the dream. What he felt was only the mattress beneath him. But it felt different now, as if even the mattress could be a tool, not a disturbance. At school, the clock started to look like a sea again. The pencils sounded loud, the chair squeaked. His thoughts wanted to build bridges between the math problem, the teacher's voice, and an island with cogwheels. Murmur felt the old panic rising. It is happening again. I am becoming too much. Then he placed his feet against the floor and asked quietly, Where are my feet right now? He drew a small circle on his paper. Not all of Dreamland, only one circle. Inside the circle, he drew a lantern. Then he wrote the first step of the assignment beside it. When the teacher walked by, Murmur placed his hand over the drawing. But the teacher stopped. Does it help you to draw while you think? The teacher asked. Murmur held his breath. Inside him, the shadow pirates nearly rose. Say no, otherwise you are strange. But the heart lantern, which was not there and still was there, asked, Do you know that, or do you fear it? Yes, Murmur said. His voice was small, but it had a wheel. If I can draw small signs, I can hear the order better. The teacher nodded slowly. Then let us try that, she said. Small signs, and you show me how they help. It felt like an enormous relief in Murmur's chest. He had been afraid he was not allowed to use the things that helped him. But maybe, sometimes, he had to open up a little and explain what actually helped. It was not a magical ending. Murmur did not sit perfectly for the rest of the day. He still forgot a page. He still tapped his foot. He even interrupted once and had to say sorry. But something had changed. Every time he thought calm only meant being still, he remembered Dreamland. Milo walking, Alba sailing, Elian flying, Lever holding things, Oliver steering, Naya lifting thoughts, Arthur building, Olivia placing her foot on water, and Murmur watching the time between them. That evening, when the light grew soft, he drew a map. Not a map you could find on a phone. A map of forests, islands, bridges, water, workshops, birds, owls, dinosaurs, mushrooms, lanterns, and a place in the middle called the Timekeepers' place. Under the map, he wrote the sentence the Dream Master had spoken. He wrote it slowly, so every word received its own time. There are dreams you search for, and then there are dreams that search for the one who can carry them. Good night, and sleep very well. Thank you for listening inside the Safe Den.